Welcome to Mission Majjhima, Ajahn.
Ajahn.
Ajahn, so tell us about Majjhima number 56, the Upāli Sutta.
So the Upāli Sutta begins with a wanderer or an ascetic named Dighatapasi, who's a disciple of Niganta Nataputta, who was the leader of the Jains and Mahavira, actually, historically. And the Jains are a consistent foil through the discourses. They were very similar to the Buddhist monks in a lot of ways, at least from our perspective, but had some important differences in doctrine. The biggest, perhaps, outlined in this discourse largely is they considered karma to be a sort of subtle matter which would accumulate onto the soul. And the goal was to stop accumulating that matter, and it wasn't determined just by intention, but so that the soul could be freed eventually. Whereas in the Buddhist conception, cetana or intention is a key component of any karmic action. So we have Dighatapasi come to the Buddha and basically ask him how many types of, or the Buddha asks him how many types of action Niganta Nataputta proclaims, Kamma. And Dighatapasi says that Niganta Nataputta actually speaks in terms of rods, danda, bodily, verbal, mental, implying that each of these is actually almost a punishment, is problematic in its own right, and then says that the bodily rod is the most powerful, the most karmically potent. Then he turns the question on to the Buddha. The Buddha responds that he teaches 3 kinds of kamma action, and that mental is the most important. And then Dighatapasi leaves, reports this all to Niganta Nataputta, and a lay supporter named Upāli overhears and is encouraged by Niganta Nataputta to go confront the Buddha based on this assertion, because how could mental action possibly be more potent than bodily or verbal? It's the most subtle, right? So he goes, and there's a dialogue between the two where basically the Buddha points out that, in the example, say, of a Jain or a person wandering and accidentally stepping on insects, the karmic weight of that action is actually determined mainly by the intention, the mental component. And through this Socratic dialogue and a few different examples, some of which are a bit esoteric for our current moment, including kind of sorcerers and such, that the mental component of an action actually is the most significant, even by Upāli's own accounting. Upāli has great faith. He takes refuge in the Buddha. The Buddha gives him gradual teaching. He attains stream entry and then basically converts, but the Buddha really tells him to consider carefully before he converts to, and this is a beautiful thing where Upāli says, if I'd converted to anyone else, because he's a very prominent householder, they would immediately take me in and tell them me just to support them. But the Buddha tells me to think carefully before converting and to keep on supporting the Jains, because my family supported them for a long time. So this beautiful instance of subtlety and grace in the teaching. The next day, I believe, Upāli is visited by the Jains and offers them alms, but has them stay outside, and initially until they ask to be let inside. And then he takes the highest seat because he's endowed with Dhamma now, and basically extols the praise of the Buddha, and Niganta Nataputta vomits blood and dies. So quite an ending, but you can't say the suttas are without color. Ajahn, what would you draw out of this discourse?
Just on that last note, the technical medical name for vomiting hot blood is hematemesis, and it's something which actually happens to people, especially if you've got ulcers in the stomach or in the esophagus. You'll start vomiting blood, and it can be caused by bacteria or whatnot in the stomach, but it can also be caused by stress. It's totally possible that Niganta Nataputta, based on all this stress of being publicly embarrassed, and so just to draw out a few other things appreciate you using this term Socratic method. The Buddha often uses this of actually asking questions, listening to the answer, and then responding accordingly. He was a master at it, and perhaps roughly contemporary actually to Socrates in Greece. But the first thing that gets drawn out, which you pointed to a little bit, is this. The Buddha says that mental action, intention, is what's most important versus the physical action. So just the physical action of stepping on ants, if one does it from an accidental mind, one's just going from here to there, doesn't want to kill, that's very different than the person who just, an angry child who's just stomping on ants because they're angry and hateful. Take another action of, a blade going into someone else's stomach. If the intention is that of a doctor, to heal, to cut open the stomach, to heal or someone else, that's the polar opposite from the bandit who basically stabs someone in the chest wanting to steal their money and kill them. Also take just putting the hand moving and putting food on someone else's plate. If the intention, may this person be happy, may they feed, may they be well, that's great. Or if they've poisoned the food and they're thinking, may this person meet with death or death-like suffering, very different. That's why the Buddha says that intention is most profound. So that's one other thing, is just drawing out the implications of that simile of, which we find of a monkey. So comparing dyeing a monkey yellow and trying to pound it, which is this kind of parable that I think Upāli gives, it's comparable to the Jain's doctrine, is like trying to dye and pound a monkey in order for it to be, beautiful, compared to taking a robe and dyeing it and pounding it. A robe is of a nature that it can take dyeing and it can take pounding and friction, and it creates a beautiful robe, whereas a monkey can take the dyeing, it can become yellow, but it can't take the pounding. Similarly, the Jain doctrine, it looks beautiful, it looks sacred, it's golden, it's yellow, like the dyed hair of the monkey, but it can't take, when you examine it, when you pound it, when you ask questions of it, it just can't take the rigorous intellectual examination, whereas the Buddha's teachings, the Dhamma, it's both beautiful on the outside and it's beautiful in the middle, beautiful in the end. It can take this rigorous pounding, it can take the examination, it can back it up. Similarly, there's this phrase of Ajahn Jayasara that the Dhamma is like a diamond, a true diamond, unlike a cubit zirconium, which the more you look at a cubit zirconium, which is a fake diamond, it looks good on the outside, but when you look closer, you see all the imperfections. Whereas a diamond, the closer you look, the more perfect it becomes. So too with the Dhamma. It looks great on the outside, and it gets more and more perfect, more and more crystalline as you look closer. So Ajahn, what would you like to draw out of this sutta in addition to these things?
I think the process of the pounding is really interesting to point to, because one of the beauties of this discourse is just seeing how the Buddha and Upāli conduct themselves with such conversational grace, and the lessons we can draw from that. So when Upāli approaches the Buddha, first Upāli gets the Buddha's recounting of the conversation he had with Dighatapasi. He doesn't just get this third-person account. He says, "What's your account?" Then the Buddha asks if he's willing to debate on the basis of truth. And if he is, then he says, "I'll talk with you." And I think this is actually really useful when talking with other religious adherents as Buddhists, is, if you sense a subtle inclination they're trying to convert you, just say, "Look, I'm happy to talk with you, but only if you can really commit that this is going to be a genuine conversation from humility." People often try to convert us as monks. I think we're worth extra points or something. So it's important, but establishing that framework, getting someone's view on something and reaffirming it and Iron Manning it, making sure you really understand. And they do that in each case, affirming a view 3 times. And then using the Socratic method of like, you get a view and then you examine it through this pounding process, but using similes. And Socrates or the Greeks compared the Socratic method to midwifery, in that it allows an understanding to incubate deep in someone. And instead of just arguing a point, if you get someone to walk with you through questions, you can initiate deep insight. And that's exactly what happens, is the Buddha brings Upāli to these realizations through Socratic method. And so I think, and then just the Buddha's grace in telling him to be careful before he converts, to make sure he's thought it through and to keep supporting those who he supported before, is just, the framing of this whole discourse is so precious. And finally, just, the key component of karma being intention. It sounds simple, but it's hugely significant.
So, Ajahn, what is the word of the week?
The word of the week is anupubi kata, which means the gradual teaching. And it comes from the word anupubi, which means the gradual, and kata, teaching or word, speech.
Composed of 5 elements: talk on generosity, talk on ethics, talk on heaven, talk on the drawbacks of sensuality, talks on the virtues of renunciation, and then finally, if someone's ready, the Four Noble Truths. So.
Sadhu Ajahn.